All right, so this would be the first week of a two-part series, sort of on Pardes, on Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, which I feel like is when I started really learning this, it felt like it was so fundamental, and not always, at least for me, it wasn't really understood until I saw some of these sources. So I wanted to share them. So today we're really going to just focus in on a single Ksava Kabbalah, uh, which is a parish on the Torah, and it's from Parshas Akev. So I brought the psukim from over there, where he's going off of, and it's talking. This is Moshe Rabbeinu talking to Bnei Israel, um, sort of giving that Musar Shmuz, that long Musar Shmuz, and this is where he's talking about Cheta Egel. So the first pasuk is Ubechorev hikatztem es Hashem, Yisanaf Hashem b'achem lashmidaschem. So this is again, that's talking about what happened at Har Sinai, what Bnei Yisrael did, and it says Ba'alusi hara lakachas luchos ha'avanim luchos habris, and we're going to see this repetition. Arba'im yom v'arbim laila lechem le'achalti, etc. Vayitan Hashem elai eshnei luchos ha'avanim ksuvim. Vayi miketz arba'im yom v'arbim laila nasan Hashem elai eshnei luchos avanim luchos habris. So we keep seeing this idea of this concept of luchos avanim. So the Ksava Kabbalah says, and he's going on luchos avanim. It says yesh li zbonin al ma shehichzer kama pa'amim beparsha zu shaluchos hayusho avanim. Why this? Yes, why this continual repetition that the luchos were made from stone? Kima lanu im hayusho eitz so matechos. What do we care what material it's made from? Kitachles kavanasakan lahochicham shavonasam garmu hisharbus luchos. The tachlis of what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them, the message is that your actions, your avon, caused the breaking, the destruction of the luchos, of the first set of luchos. Lo haya min haroi ki im lahazker mahu shavach lahem amadu yukar orcham kagon luchos ha'edus luchos habris. So what should have been the focus should have been what makes the luchos so incredibly valuable, so special. And that is that the luchos were the luchos ha'edus, luchos habris, which the pasuk also says. Amnam ichus chomram shahayu sho'even she'in bazeh shum hisnasus v'chashivus listara ba'avodam ma lo lahachlo kol kach. But the material, which really isn't all that important, why should that be repeated over and over again? B'yosher shehekdim kol pam luchos even the luchos edus habris ve'in maharoi lahakdim hatefel lahikar. And why does it first call them luchos havanim and then luchos edus habris? Seems like, he says, it seems like you're substituting the tafel for the ikar. Okay, so everyone's got the question down. Like, what's this repetition about? What's so special about the luchos havanim? So he says, "Lachei nearly she'ein shem even be'inyan ze al chomer haluchos v'gashmiosam stein." We're going to see a lot of how we understand these different types of stones in Yiddish. So he says it's not that we're worried about the material of the luchos itself, the physical material. Aval inyanu kalashan misham roa even Yisrael. He says, really, this is more of the word even here is being used in a different way. So this is a pasuk in Sof Parshas Vayechi. It's talking about the brachos of Yosef, and I brought it in at the bottom. I'm just going to go down to there so we can take a quick look at that. So when Yaakov gives the bracha to Yosef, he says, Mide aver Yaakov misham roa even Yisrael. That Yosef, right, becomes the leader of Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. But he's referred to, or the Bnei Yisrael referred to as Even Yisrael. So what does that mean? What does it mean, Even Yisrael, the rock of Yisrael? So the Radak says, Misham roa Even Yisrael, Misham nichvod Yosef shenasan lo hokel roa ata kol Yisrael. Meaning that now you are going to be the roa, the shepherd of all Yisrael. Lefisha Evan etzem chazaka v'guf echad kina ko Yisrael le'evan. So he says it's a nickname. It's simply meant to represent the fact that a stone is a very strong thing. It is representing all of Bnei Yisrael together, that we're strong together. All of Yisrael akar binyan ha'olam, or maybe it's because Bnei Yisrael are considered to be the foundation of the world. Therefore, karam Evan al derech mashal. So therefore, as a mashal, we are considered an Evan Yisrael, meaning that we're sort of the building block of the world. Unclos also translates it not as a stone. He says Evan means av ubein. It's an amalgamation of the two words, av ubein, meaning that Yosef becomes the roa, the shepherd of Yaakov and the Shvatim of Yaakov, right, the father and the sons. So the Kabbalah is using that idea that it can't simply be a stone. It must mean that it's representing something else. Okay. So it says Sha'amru bo bali halashon sharoso hayesot ha'ikari shal protov. This is really showing that this is the foundation of all of the different parts. Ki mehusa even hu kibbutz chelkei chol shis achru bo lihios etzem echad. Because what is a regular plain old stone? It is, this amalgamation of sand that sort of comes together, or dirt that comes together to become very strong. Kacha yesod kol davar sheprotav klulim umizamsim bo lisachid imo nikra even. So Evan can mean anything like that. It could be more of a mushal, that it means anything where you have all the parts coming together and becoming stronger together. And he said that analogy seems to work well when we think about the Aseret Dibros being the foundation of all Taryag mitzvos. Ki kulam nikbotzim umizachdim bohem. Because we know, as Rashi points out in Sof Parshas Mishpatim, Vetna lecha luchos ha'even u'kamar shekos b'chi tisa charusa haluchos. So Meforshim bring in that there's an idea from the Psukim that all Taryag mitzvahs are either part of, literally were actually written on the luchos, or at least they are being alluded to through the Aseret Dibros. L'chein karam luchos even klomar luchos she'aleim yesod kol mitzvos. And therefore you can say what's luchos even, meaning that the luchos, that upon these luchos all the mitzvos are built upon. V'hodia b'zeh yukar ugudo erech aseres hadibros asher kol tareg mitzvos nechlalos utflois behem v'hinei kvar lamdu raboseinu mikro echad yotze lekama ta'amim. So this is that everything comes out of these mitzvahs, and we have a Gemara in Sanhedrin, and he's going to quote one in Shabbos as well. Achas diber Elokim shtayim zu shemanu. A pasuk in Tehillim says Hashem gives us one utterance, shtayim zu shemanu. But we can learn many things, several things, two things, whatever it is, from a single utterance from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Amru Shabbos in Shabbos Peches. We know the concept of shivim panim laTorah, again coming from the same idea that you can have one piece of Torah and have 70 different ways of understanding it. Kakasuv kepatish yifutz sela, as it says that from the hammer sort of breaks apart the rock into all these pieces. So one physical rock becomes many different pieces. And again, it says that same mashal. Okay. So Adkan, this is sort of, I think, sort of his introduction into this idea of where he wants to take this. From here, he's going to really sort of dig deeper. So now that we introduced this this concept, and even this mushal above, how the hammer hits the rock and splits it into all these different pieces. He says, let's look at that analogy a little bit deeper, a little bit further. So it says, im aponim, his bonus v'amados hamischokos bekavonos mikros haTorah. What can come out of a single, psukim of the Torah, how we can learn so much from, a single pasuk. Ki arba'a mine avonim heim. There are 4 different types of stones. Shemischalfim zemizeh bechozek v'kushi. And they are different from each other in both strength and in hardness. Ad shemisibosam mishtarim zemizeh be'inin hispotzesusam. That not only are they different, I guess, in their essence of what makes them, but also when you split them, the effect is very, very different. V'koach hadocha nitzrach litzpotzetzus v'is Pardes min even ze eno maspik lepirud v'ispotetzus min acher min avodim. And the amount of effort it takes and what how the rock ends up splitting is going to be very different between one type of rock and another type of rock. Okay. Kacha arba'im panim haklolim sheyeshna betorah Pardes. And he says that this analogy really can hold true through the idea of the 4 different faces that we know exist in Torah of Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. Mechulafim heim zemizeh bekushi tochin v'omek havanosim hapnimis misiba zu mishunim zemizeh be'inin ishtadlus lahasagos kavanosam. And the amount of the difficulty, the amount that you have to sort of dig into them is going to be different between them, and also how much effort it takes in order to understand the kavana at different levels is going to be very different. And they're not going to be equal. So the first is this very generic term of Evan. Rishorshu bein lashon binyan. And where does the word Evan come from? It comes from the word ban, or I think binyan, to build. Veheim avnei hasoda mitzuyim b'yosef v'rov tashmishan lebinyan. These are the ordinary stones you find in the field, and they are used quite often for building. Veheim morkavos min chol v'afar. And these are, again, this type of stone is simply an amalgamation of sand and dirt that comes together and becomes hard. L'chein nikraim avnei chol. And that's why it's referred to as a stone of sand, azadsteine. Veheim mishamshim la'avnei rechayim la'mashkov la'mezuzos l'shar tashmishim bevinyan. And we know that you can picture old houses, right, that were constructed from using just stones that were around and then putting some mortar between them. Lefi harkovosam zos nuchos hein lishdaber lispotzitz aide koach hadocha. And because of just the nature of how they're formed, it sort of works pretty well to just take a hammer and split it and sort of form it into the shape or the size that you need. And this is another part of the analogy that he builds, is that this type of rock, which is a bit softer than other types of rocks, when you give it a big bang, the rock just sort of falls apart. All the splinters don't go flying everywhere. They don't go far. They don't go flying very far. Because all the different parts aren't all that stuck together. So it sort of just crumbles a little bit. Because they're already sort of porous, and they sort of lend themselves to being split and to being even to sort of carving into them. These are the types of stones that are fairly easy to carve into as well. This is sort of the analogy for what is the first idea of pshat, learning pshat in the in Torah. Ki lahavin hamikros b'derech zeh ein tzarich lehishtadlos gedola. To learn pshat doesn't require that much. Certainly, relative to the other three that we're going to see, learning pshat is it doesn't require as much effort. Rak sheyada perish hamilos v'chaber osam zeh im zeh daila liyada hakavana hapshutos shebemikra. Really, it just takes, and it's not, I shouldn't say just, but, because understanding the words and being able to string them together to understand the concept is not simply, it certainly isn't always easy, even at a pshat level. But again, relative to the other levels that we're going to talk about, that's really all it requires. It's just basic language skills. Mizdomia muvan el shemos nerdafim v'kfalei inyan b'milos shonos v'gab'milos atzva in hevdel lo behem im heim maleim v'chsarim. You don't have to worry about, well, how is this concept being talked about elsewhere? Over here we're using these words, over there we use different words, over here it's malay, over there it's chasar, right? None of that comes into play when we're learning pshat. Learning pshat is learning just the basic translation of the words. I'll call Eile lo yasim baal hapshat in ayin hashgachaso ki lo yishma rakata mimi bli liachid kavana o inyan nirsa lecho ashnoyi mishnoyi hadavar v'alashon. And this is why, for instance, that the kids can come home from school and have a basic understanding of Megillas Esther, or the basic understanding of all of Sefer Bereshis, because at a story level that they can understand. What's going on really behind the scenes that they miss, but at a pshat level they could understand it. And therefore it's all becomes one thing. There's not there's no sort of hidden meanings. There's no mushal and nimshal. It's all, again, at the pshat level. It's also limiting, however. You can only understand at the pshat level, you're only understanding things as they are implied by the words themselves. So, there's two ideas, two different parts of this analogy that he is forming. One is that breaking the rock at a pshat level doesn't require that much effort to break this type of a rock, this basic type of a rock that you find in the fields. At the same time, when you break it, the pieces don't go flying very far either, which means that everything is sort of self-contained at the pshat level. You're not trying to sort of, go find those different pieces, and now how do they all fit together? What's really going on here? So again, we're going to see this, but that's two sides of the analogy. Okay. Hamina sheni mina avanim hu nikra sela, pels. So the second one is a sela. Sheish bo ichos sidoyev nikroim avne sid. V'herkovos elu havanim yoser kosher v'chozet memin avne asod v'enim sipugim kolkach. So this sela is a little bit more. It's a denser rock. It's a stronger rock, and it's not quite as porous as what we saw up above. L'chein kosher l'shavram b'hakosa patish imlo biyad chazaka, requires more strength to break it apart. L'sibazu chelkei shavir yitzposu lemrochok machmas chozek yad hadocha bechelkei harkavosam mehadukim ze b'ze meod, and therefore also the splinters, the pieces are also going to go flying a little bit further. Okay, kachohu ponim hashini shebetorah hanikra drash. So that's also going to be analogous at the drash level, which is the second level. Ki adore shishtado lefales haros kol teva uveteva b'mosnei tzedek. At the drash level, you're already trying to understand a little bit more about each word, not just a little bit. This is a much deeper level, looking at the choice, the word choice for every single word that's being used. Ki Yodesha Torah lo kisva lashona bekeri v'hizdamin od derech tzachus liyofia mlitza levad. We know that the Torah isn't simply using random language or just sort of what comes to mind, and it's not just trying to give us a nice story. There's a reason why each word is chosen. And it's not, again, there is a reason why it's written over here, chaser, and over there, malay, meaning chaser, malay, meaning that, over here it has a cholam, and over there it doesn't have the cholam. V'rak b'kabanam yuchedes, hishtamsha haTorah ba'achas min hatevos o min ha'mamorim mizdam yamuvan. And therefore, the word choice is also coming to teach me something. Lirmos olahoros al yado inim yuchad asher lo ratza o lo yitachi levaro be'er hetev. And it could be something that's very subtle, that either for whatever reason the Torah didn't want to go into in great depth at a pshat level, like really sort of spelling everything out, or because it might not have really lent itself. Some subjects don't really lend themselves to speaking out in great terms. Either way, it forces the one learning to really sort of dig in and figure out what's going on. Whether it's because it just wants to speak in brevity, or whether there's another tachlis altogether. And therefore, at the drash level, you can't simply just leave it and say, well, that word was chosen, but it's just whatever. Nothing is just, sort of stam or whatever. Everything has its place. Right? Everything is written from the Chachma Ha'aliyona, the lofty Chachma, the Chachma that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'lisofik b'kavana v'ratzon bachar be'ela lirmos bam al inin nister b'ma'amara shelo ratzo levero b'perush v'tmira b'melitzaso. And it didn't want to, for whatever reason, the Torah didn't want to spell it out. It wanted to leave it as something that is, maybe a parable, or written as more of a storyline or something else, and you have to figure out what is the point of that. And therefore, when you come into learning at a drash level, you have to understand that the mindset of the Torah comes from a place of purity. And everything, there is no sort of ulterior motive or anything else. Everything is simply from purity and has to be learned that way. Vasher yikra zar etzel hamedakteku etzel hadarish leinin neus. Ki kamoshalo nivra davar ba'olam beli tachlis miuchad lo. Just like nothing was created in this world that doesn't have a purpose. And therefore, nothing is here. Nothing is in the Torah that also doesn't have a very specific purpose. That's why you're looking at every word, every letter, and even inside a Sefer Torah, every single, the way that, all those different parts of how the letter is constructed as well, or the letters are constructed. And therefore, as much effort is put into learning at a drash level, that's how deep into the Inyan you will be able to get. Just like when you hit the rock even harder, the pieces go flying even further. That's the analogy to the depth of learning that is required at the drash level. Okay, so we've gotten through two of the levels. Hamina Shlishi, and this is sort of following the same idea. Mina Shlishi, Mina Avanim hu nikra Tsur. The third type of rock is a Tsur, v'hu Yoser Kasha v'chazak min hasela. That's even a stronger and a more dense rock than the Sela was. V'hu min even abilti murkav min chol v'afar af lo mechalki mesidim ki I min chalki afar bilvad. This one is not made from any kind of amalgamation. This is just this is one type of rock, one type of stone made from one type of dirt or whatever is the I guess forms it. Elisha afar hu hahu eno achor v'choshech kishar afar avohu zach metzuchzach. And this is more of this isn't a dark stone, but this is more of those crystalline stones. I'm trying to remember what they're called. You sort of split open what looks like a rock and you have that crystal inside of it.
Quartz.
The term. What's that?
Quartz.
Quartz, like a quartz or right, and any of those types of things. Umareo in Karen Hashor. And it has that sort of shiny sheen to it, just like the horn of an ox. V'nikra Evan Karni, and therefore it's called like an Evan Karni, a harnestiger Stein, right, from a horn. She yeshbo gamken klipim kamo shematzor bekeren hashor v'nikra tzur al shem shechalke hakavasa tzrurim umidubokim zeh bezeh b'yosu lachozek kushav efshar sheyushcha zolaso so chad b'chorif. This is such a sort of a dense and strong stone that this type of a stone can actually be sharpened until it's very sharp. Kasakin, just like into a knife. Right? It's said by that sort of difficult passage where Moshe Rabbeinu is on his way down to Mitzrayim, and he has Tzipporah and the children with him. And and it says that the Malach wanted to kill Moshe Rabbeinu. It says v'tikach Tzipporah tzur v'tichros, and many learn that that's when Tzipporah performed bris milah. But it says that she took a tzur. That's what she performed the bris milah with, was this tzur, this type of a rock. So it sort of fits that this is a hard rock that can be sharpened into a blade. Gam efshar lahashchizo ad shelo tiyeh pegima kol ikar. And you can sharpen it all the way down to there's no nicks at all. As it says that a shochet uses a tzur. And therefore the strength it requires to break apart this type of a rock is even more so than a sela. So too, now we're at the remez level. The right now we're into remez is already looking at understanding from the Rashi Tevos of something. What is it hinting at? Right, that's the idea of the remez is something that's not quite in there, but what's being hinted at. So it could be Rashi Tevos, Sofei Tevos, or it can also go by the last letter of each word. It can go by the gematrias, the numbers, the numerology behind it. Al osios rabosos vezeiros, v'hanekudos sheba osios v'chodoma le'ela. And all these different things that we can be, the nekudos, anything else that we can look at and say there's a remez to something else that's going on. Asher belisa fake yishtardu sa'in bezehu yoser kosher v'chozak ma'od. This is going to take you even more effort than learning at the drash level. ודומה לתפוס את הצור לכן ככוח ההשתדלות הגדולה בזה, ככה גם כוח הסוגס אינם יוסר עמוקים, כי בעל הרמז יוסר שידבק מחשבוסו בדברי התורה וירגל עצמו לחשוב בהם, יוסר יוסיפו הבינה, and therefore, this is going to require that you even, I guess, sort of put your thoughts into it and really sort of connect to the idea into them, and this is what will add to or add on top of bina. Remember we talked about that the bina is the idea of being able to apply concepts, right? Learning chachma and then being able to apply that's bina, and that's really what's required at the remez level, is being able to use that bina to really use the application to be able to understand what's the remez going, what's the remez that's here. Yoser titzatzim nafsho bohem lahargish chachma al chachma bina al bina. Okay, so that is at the remez level. We're almost done here. So the fourth one is the chalamish. Who od yoser chazak v'yoser kasha min atzur, right? Even more stronger and dense than the tzur. V'nichol b'zeh hamin even tov, diamond. So now we're at, it's a diamond. It's something, the hardest material known, or something like that. Shu hageshem yoser chazak v'kasha mikol geshamim v'noadim lanu. This is the hardest material known to us, right? This requires, to be able to split something like this requires, just uncommon, and you can't even measure how much strength it requires to do so. This is the sod level, or the analogy of that. And this is already at a wonder. This is the wonders. This is at a very, spiritual level. Nisr havenella min hamon mirov anshe mada. This is completely hidden, right? This is what we call the Nisr level, although Remes is also at the Nisr level. But this is certainly, Sod is truly at the Nisr level. This is hidden from the vast majority of people. Ki ein legaloso rak anshe segula. Only a mute, only a select few will get to be able to learn at this level. This is really learning. They're referred to as the Sfarim HaKadoshim, right? The Holy Sfarim is what they'll talk about when they're learning Nister, because this is something that really at the level of godliness, K'maisa Bereshis, K'maisa Merkava, right? Really understanding what is Maisa Bereshis, what was the Merkava. Understanding Malachim, understanding what is the Mara Demus Kavod Hashem. We can't even understand what that means. This requires just sort of an infinite amount of ability, of strength to be able to learn at this level. This is extremely deep. Ki hamisasek bam belev tahor v'aram kadosh novem toch chadre levavo inyanim niflaim ad in cheker. To be able to achieve this requires not just chachma, but it's also the lev tahor, that it also requires from a mido standpoint, from a musar standpoint, that you've really sort of refined yourself. So this is something that you're able to understand. In Chegem is Gabrim Bahochim Becho Eis Lefi Gadol Koach Ishtadlus Iyuno Ki In Kates Lechachmas Torah, and this shows you just how infinite Torah really is, to be able to learn or know that there are people who are learning at the Sod level, even though the vast majority of us won't ever achieve that. But to just understand that there are people who do achieve that level shows us just the infinite idea of Torah. And just to so let's just finish this off. Nelios chomer aluchos romez almalas hapnimis atorah asher liyoker archait starich lahasagasa v'yishtad lusil niflos lachin b'chocha roa hane'aman es yisrael la'oram al masha gormu ba'avonim la'aved. So this is why, getting back to the initial question of the Ksav Kabbalah, why do we call it Luchos Avonim over and over and over again? Because what Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to do with this analogy of Luchos Avonim was to show this through his Musar, teaching Bnei Israel, this is what you lost. This is what the Avon of the Cheta Egel caused, is that you could actually lose this. And just how important and just how special the Torah is. That's why over and over again he talks about what the luchos are made of, meaning luchos avonim lechin amar kan beloshen rabim lucho ko arba minim minei ha'even. Why is it luchos avonim and not luchos even? Luchos avonim because there's 4 different pieces that are going into Torah. That's what he was alluding to. Ki shem even hu shem hasuga kolo. Because the idea of the Evan is more the generic term that encompasses all the others. So Selavet Surah Chalamish, Aim Prati Asuk, those are only the other types, are just a type of rock. But Makamacha Yukra Belashim Yachid, Luchos Evan. But earlier in Psukim, by Mishpatim and by Kitisa, it calls them Luchos Ha'evan, not Luchos Avonim. Why? The horos always chadus ha'arbapanim, to show us that all 4 of the levels of learning Torah all come together. it's really a unified learning. Kima shehem nifradim zeh mizeh eno rak lemaris choleshes einenu. We're not trying to sort of point out by dividing the learning into four different types of learning to say that, hey, I'm only at the pshat, at the pshat level, really, but there's people who are at a much higher level. That's not the idea. It's really to introduce us that there are, even at the levels that we're learning, or the same piece of Torah that we're learning, there's much more depth to learn about it. So the Ksav Kabbalah was one of the students of the Gra. So he now says, like those who will testify about just how great the Gaon was, Sha'amar Seder Halimut Hu Melmata L'Lamala, that the Gra Seder Halimut started from Pshat and worked its way up to the Sod level. Vasaga Tenchehu Melamala Lamata Shebehavin Hasod Al Burav Yavin Akol Al Burav Hapshat Veremez Vadrush Bahasod V'chol Zman Shelo Yavin Hasod Afilu Hapshat Enu Borer. Because the Gra would say that he would start from the Pshat and work his way up, and he would say, because if you don't understand Sod, you don't understand Pshat. Now, obviously, we have to take that with a grain of salt because we are getting something out of learning even at a Pshat level. But certainly, the idea is to open our eyes and say, wow, how much there is to Torah when you can learn the same piece of Torah at four different levels. We can learn it, my fourth grade children, right, can be learning the psukim at their level, and we can be adding on and learning it at a higher level. We're still learning the same piece of Torah, but we're understanding it at a deeper level. And then obviously when you have, the Gra and others that are learning it at even a higher level, they're learning that same piece of Torah even at a higher level with even more depth than we are. So that is, an insight from the Ksav Kabbalah into what is Pardes, how it's the analogy built around Luchos Avonim. And next week, we'll look at more practical examples of where we can take a piece of Torah and look at it from what is Pshat, what is Remez, what is Drash, what is Sod. And we're also going to learn that just to give you a little idea of what we're going to talk about next week is within Pardes, there is Pardes. So within Pshat, there is the Pshat within the Pshat, there's the Remez within the Pshat, there's a Drash within the Pshat, and there's Sod within the Pshat. So we're going to see that with some examples next week.